We'll go ahead and call to order the Board of Adjustments for the City of Wilmington's meeting. Today is Thursday, March 20th. It is 1 o'clock. Board of Adjustment hearings before the Board of Adjustments are quasi-judicial in nature. Decisions of the board are based on the record of these proceedings. To grant a variance requires a concurrent vote of 4/5 of members of the board. To reverse or modify the determination of an administrative official requires a simple majority. Evidence submitted to the board for review becomes part of the record. Appeals to the board's decisions are to Superior Court and are based on the record. Appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of the filing of the board's order in the Planning Division. A hearing before the board is conducted in accordance with rules of procedure. Those who want to testify in a case are sworn as witnesses. The chairperson recognizes those who want to testify or their attorneys for presentations of evidence during the hearings. To ensure that all testimony is properly recorded, please come forward to address the board, state your name, address, and speak clearly. Our next item, anyone that's going to be sworn in, would you please stand up?
Staff, applicants, members of the public who wish to speak today, if you'll stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next item will be the approval of the minutes from the February 20th, 2025 meeting. Is there if there's no changes, to take a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Those pass. Next on to new business. Our item is for 413 Shipyard Boulevard, a variance to City Code 18-321, parking lot landscaping requirements, and Catherine Thurston will present.
Good afternoon. Thank you. The subject property at 413 Shipyard Boulevard is a vacant lot in the Commercial Services Zoning District, which contained 2 dilapidated houses until about 2021, and that shows those houses in about 2019. The property is located on the north side of Shipyard Boulevard, with the church to the west, a contractor's office to the east, and a vacant commercially zoned tract to the south. Surrounding zoning is commercial services on 3 sides and residential zoning to the north. The applicant has proposed to develop the property with a 3,200 square foot contractor's office and associated parking. The applicant attended a pre-TRC meeting on January 16th and was informed of various code requirements, including parking and landscaping that would be necessary for development of the site. As part of that review, the notes on which are included as an attachment, city staff informed the applicant that the quantity of parking shown on the site plan far exceeds code requirements. Based on the site's location within 650 feet of a single dwelling district and the square footage of the proposed building, the applicant's only required to provide 5 parking spaces. The proposed site plan shows 11 parking spaces, plus a garage door on the rear that may accommodate additional parking within the building, which is more than double the required parking for the proposed use. In lieu of a reduction to the required parking, the applicant has requested variances to landscaping requirements that are set forth in City Code Sections 18.318 and 18.321. City Code Section 18.318 requires that parking areas contain sufficient tree coverage to shade 30% of the impervious vehicular use area associated with the project. The applicant has not proposed any parking lot shading. The illustration shows what is meant by parking lot shading, which serves many purposes, including reducing the heat island effect of parking lots, absorbing stormwater, and providing aesthetic appeal. The trees shown here were placed over the applicant's site plan to show where trees could be accommodated, even with the proposed building and the excess parking. It doesn't provide 30% shading, which is what's required by code, but it does show that the applicant has not demonstrated to staff why parking lot landscaping can't be installed at all. Additionally, City Code Section 18.321 requires landscape islands at the end of all parking rows and a landscape area at least 5 feet in width along portions of the parking lot that abut a separate parking lot or driveway. The applicant has not proposed any parking lot landscaping. In fact, areas of the lot that are not large enough to accommodate parking have not even been proposed to satisfy the city's requirements, which is shown in the upper right-hand corner of the site plan beside the parking spot that's labeled 7. Staff would also like to note that the tax map that was included in the applicant's submittal shows that there was landscaping on the site as of May 2019, but that has since been removed, and there are no approvals on file with the city for removal of that landscaping. On January 30th, 2025, the applicant submitted a request for a variance to City Code Sections 18.318 and 18321 to eliminate all requirements related to parking lot landscaping. And this matter is set for hearing before the Board of Adjustment today, March 20th, 2025. I'd like to ask that the board place the case summary and all attachments into the record. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of staff, but the applicant is also present.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions at this time? Question? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and I'm glad you all are concerned about having proper coverage as well as other landscape features. I guess the question I have is, has somebody calculated what the sort of magic number of parking spaces might be if you also had the 30%? Because the illustration that you just provided, and I appreciate that, was, as you just said, less than 30%, but it kind of is illustrative. Is there a compromise or a middle ground number there that you all have calculated, or that the applicant could?
We've calculated what the minimum parking requirement would be, and those spaces would be 8.5 feet wide by 18 feet deep. The required handicap space would be larger, of course. We haven't calculated what 30% of that would be on a site plan, because it really depends on the tree placement. Let me go back to the diagram.
Right.
That tree, each tree isn't, 100% of that tree isn't shading the parking lot. So it would just be the portion of the canopy that actually does provide that shading.
Got it. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll next ask if the agent for the applicant would like to come up.
Good afternoon. Cliff Brom, RC Engineering, 15226 US Highway 17 in Hampstead. So the business that is going in here is a relocation of East Atlantic Plumbing. The owner was looking to relocate, found this piece of property, and he's just an old country gentleman, and he had actually gone in and removed trees, built a parking pad, ordered his building before somebody realized what was going on, not sure who, and told him, say, hey, you need to pump the brakes. And so that's where we got involved with it and started helping him with the site plan and everything. And as you can see on the site plan, the problem we have is we've got 10 pounds of potatoes we're trying to put into a 5-pound sack. So naturally, we've got potatoes that just won't fit. Like I said, this is a plumbing business. Currently, Mr. Richards has 12 employees, I think 10 technicians, plumbers, and an admin staff of 2. And so that's the reason we have designed the parking like it is, to accommodate his current staff. He also has a service vehicle that is available for each one of his technicians. So the current plan right now, the service vehicles, the vans, will be parked on site overnight. When his technicians come in the morning, they're going to have to find somewhere to park the personal vehicle, move the service vehicle, and then put his personal vehicle in a parking spot. The plan shown here with the trees in the back, we could certainly accommodate trees in that setback area at the back, but it was my understanding and interpretation from the UDO that we had to have islands on the end of the parking rows of a certain square footage. And as you can see, we've only got about 5 foot left over by the time we put in the van accessible ADA and then get the parking that we can along that back property line. Then in regards to the other section of UDO with the parking down the property line with the church, right now the building the size it is and having to put parallel parking down along the side of the building, we're only left with 22 foot of a drive aisle. The UDO calls for a 23-foot drive aisle at a commercial site. I've talked to the engineer, traffic engineer, and he said that he was fine with reducing that 23 to 22 foot as long as the fire marshal was. So I corresponded with the fire marshal earlier this week, and he said he didn't have a problem with reducing that to 22 foot. So the only way we could incorporate landscaping along that left-hand property line would be to further narrow that drive aisle. And by the time we get a 10-foot plant bed in there, now we're down to a 12-foot drive aisle, which is only accommodate one-way traffic. And I don't know if the fire marshal and the city engineer would sign off on the 12-foot drive aisle.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anybody have any questions? Anyone? We might have to ask you to come back up after we do the hearing.
Okay.
but- All right, okay. We'll go ahead and move forward and open up the evidentiary hearing. This is for time for the public to provide information that's relevant or substantive to the matter at hand. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? All right, seeing that they do not have any, we'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing. Now we'll move into, does the city have anything to add?
I will just point out that on the applicant's original submittal, and it was included as part of your case summary, they did request a reduction to the width of the drive aisle, which is something that's appropriately before the engineering division rather than the Board of Adjustment, so that was excluded from your consideration. If the parking spaces on the side of the building were eliminated, then the 5-foot landscaping strip could, of course, be accommodated. I'll also point out that landscaping is required on either ends of the parallel parking as well if those spaces are to remain.
All right, does anyone have questions for the city?
Yeah, this is this proposed asphalt for the parking lot?
I would have to defer to the applicant on that.
Yeah, yes, sir. We'll probably have some questions for you now since we got through that part of it.
Yes, sir, the proposed parking is asphalt.
And for the city, Catherine, is the 30% shade coverage, that applies only to impervious surfaces, or would that apply to pervious surfaces as well?
It would apply to all area that's used for parking.
So no matter if it's pervious or impervious?
Correct. The impervious would help out with the stormwater review if that were to be proposed.
Okay, all right, that's all I've got.
Other questions for either the city or the applicant's agent? Yes, sir.
If I may, perhaps for the city, if you could go back to that slide that shows the lot again without the mock trees, the mock-up of the trees. I'm just trying to figure out, so what's going on right in front of the proposed structure? Is that something that cannot be used for that sort of, yes, exactly where your arrow is. Is that something that can't be used for parking, or what's going on there? Yeah.
That piece, that's the required sidewalk in front of the building. And then that sidewalk has to come down parallel to the drive.
Okay.
And connect to the sidewalk out front.
I see.
But as far as the rest of the area,
yeah,
that is open.
that is open.
The only caveat there, and it's hard to see on this site plan here.
Yeah.
But there is a site triangle that will be required by both the town and the DOT that will have to remain open, and that site triangle takes up a fair portion of that open area right there.
The reason I am obviously asking this is because I was just wondering if there were space potentially there for, if one could use some of that for parking in lieu of some other piece of what we're otherwise seeing as parking spaces, if you see what I'm saying.
And as long as it was acceptable to the town, I think we could probably get in. I don't have my glasses. I can't see. Let's see. I'm not sure what the dimension is off of that. Well, we could get two spaces in there, and I'm not sure. I know on another project I've got, DOT is, we've got to have a certain setback from the road, from the parking. And I'm afraid in this situation, since we're right there on the road, pretty much, if we try to put parking in front of the building, we would be in violation of the DOT standards.
All right,
And
thank
so
you.
they would not allow it.
Understood. Thank you, Thank you, sir.
Okay. Other questions? Catherine, did you have something to add?
I'll just add that there is a required landscape street yard along Shipyard Boulevard, and the applicant has not requested any waivers from, or any variances from that requirement.
I think we've got plenty of room to accommodate that.
Thank you, thank you, Catherine.
And so, I would just like to add, I know Kathy mentioned the 3 spaces or 4 spaces, 8 through 11 on the side of the building. If we did away with those, we would have room to put that 5-foot strip. If we do away with those, then this project is dead in the water from the client's perspective, because he's going to have 4 employees that he just simply can't accommodate parking for at the business. And that's no fault of the town's. Again, I mean, he sort of went into this gung-ho without knowing anything and didn't know what the requirements are. But that's why we're here asking for the variance to allow the parking like it is and adjustments on the landscaping. And we would be more than glad to accommodate anything that we could to help offset that in the setback area at the rear or the front yard, as long as it didn't interfere with anything else as far as, the site triangle and items like that.
I think there are some remedies to some of the variance requests, maybe not in full,
Sure.
but partial. You've got your streetscape, landscaping in the front. You have room for a tree there, a couple trees in the back. I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to granting a variance in some fashion, but I do think some additional planning needs to be put into this to get some parking lot shading in place. And I was going to ask a pervious, impervious question also, but it's not making a difference. I think some additional planning for the shading needs to be undertaken.
And so, and maybe Catherine can help, without reducing parking spaces or the building footprint, the only portions of the parcel that we would have available for that would be in their rear setback or in the front.
Right, the front and the rear setback.
Yes, sir. And would that be, would the town be agreeable to that? Or
I'm sorry, what was your question?
The councilman was saying, or board member was saying that he thinks he's in favor of some variance, but he also thinks that we need some shading and some landscaping there. The only place that, without reducing parking or the building footprint, which either one I think would kill this project for the owner, that we have available is the area, the setback area in the rear, or the area in front of the building, as long as we stay out of the site triangle and met, all other requirements.
I think that there are some options to better comply with the code that haven't been presented yet. I'll also, just a correction, that the impervious surface areas they aren't required for the parking lot landscaping. So even proposing impervious parking areas, pervious parking areas could help with your request.
So pervious surfaces don't have to meet the shading
30%,
requirements?
correct, yes.
That would be a relatively easy fix. Just move away from asphalt to a pervious parking surface.
So let me ask a question, because I know at the state level, gravel is not considered pervious unless you go in with 57 stone and geotextile matting, and the 57 stone has to be so thick that it's almost untraversable. Is that the same for the town?
I think that we're kind of getting into what would be part of the technical review committee's role, and including our engineering division and the review of the pervious versus impervious, and what would satisfy their technical requirements while remaining pervious. Those are conversations I think that would need to occur outside of the Board of Adjustment hearing, which is to demonstrate that there's some sort of a hardship involved in complying with code.
Catherine,
Okay,
if it's a pervious surface, does there have to be any parking lot shading?
Again, I would have to defer to our technical review team. I think that if the entire site, can we swear in Brian Chambers
Sure.
to speak to TRC requirements?
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
The shading requirement itself is particular to impervious surface coverage. So if the entire lot was pervious, then you wouldn't have a shading requirement. However, you would still have landscape islands, foundation plantings, buffers, street yards, and everything else. It would just be particular to that one standard.
So with the impervious, we would still have to have the islands on the sides of those, the rear parking, what's shown on here now that you can see 2 through 6.
Yep.
Which would eliminate 2 parking spots. And we would still have to have the landscape strip down the left-hand property line, which then would eliminate parking spots 8, 9, 10, and 11.
May I?
Sure.
So if I understand correctly, and the city can correct me if I'm wrong, so with a lot like this, the minimum number of parking spots that one should have are 5. You all are planning 11. The maximum would be 12. Maybe you don't know this yet, sir, because you may or may not have talked about this with the person you're representing, but how many parking spaces really, because I was a little confused there, do you all really need between this magic number of 5 and the proposed number of 11? In other words, are all 11 really needed? I guess is the bottom line question, sir.
As I mentioned earlier, right now, his current staffing levels are 10 technicians, plumbers, and an admin staff of 2, so he's got a staff of 12 at the moment. And all of his technicians have company vehicles, which would be parked on the premises, overnight and weekends, holidays. So they would need there would be a minimum of 10 spaces in the evenings and weekends.
Catherine, let me ask you a question regarding, is there room to continue a conversation on what could be done to accommodate the parking? Like right now, it doesn't seem that there was enough of a conversation. Like you sort of got surprised when you went to TRC because no one had looked at it before. But it looks like there might be a way that if we continued this to our next meeting, that you might be able to meet with the city to come up with a compromise. Because for us, we're going to have to rule based on the 4 findings of fact.
Sure.
And that would be very difficult to do probably right now. So it might be, and I'm just one person. But
Sure.
looking at that, I'm just wondering if, I wanted to ask Catherine if you saw that as an option.
So,
I think that would be appropriate to ensure that if a variance is warranted, it's the minimum variance to make use of the property.
I think it might be, it's 100% you and your clients, or the client's call on that, but
so could you explain that a little bit better so I fully
yeah,
understand? Because right now, like I said, the UDO calls for a minimum of 5 parking spots.
Yeah. What we're suggesting, because of for the variance, what you have to meet, this 4 findings of fact, and going forward that there may be ways that you can can work through some of these variants by working directly with the city a little bit more before we hear this. So you could continue this to our next meeting, so to avoid the chance of it being denied, and then, like I said, your project's dead at that point.
Sure,
I'm thinking it might
understood.
be worth the month to have that conversation with the city to try to work through some things, because in listening to it, it looks like there's some options for y'all that could lessen the variances. And I'm just trying to avoid you having a full flat denial.
You could
on this.
explore,
Understood.
impervious surface options for the city of Wilmington. That would eliminate the shading, so you don't have to worry about that at all. Maybe look at reconfiguring the parking a little bit, so you can have, at least a partial landscape island. So, I mean, I think.
And I would be more than glad to continue those conversations. We've been through 2 pre-TRC, I don't know what you want to call them, meetings or what have you.
Yeah.
And I think to give what the client needs, we've pretty much exhausted the options. And like I said, it's just unfortunate situation. The gentleman bought the lot without knowing, what all the requirements are. And I mean, that's 100% on him. We're just looking to see if there's a way to accommodate what he needs and, make him happy and keep the town happy as well.
Yeah, and there's
But if Catherine thinks there's something, I mean, like I said, I can certainly have a conversation with him, but knowing that he's got 12 employees, if we only provide parking for 7 or 8, I don't know that the other 4 employees are going to bus in or, park remotely. And and that's just something, that's not my decision to be made, it's definitely his.
Yeah, no, I just want to put that out there, just
Yes, sir.
because of everything. And like I said, you don't have to. You can continue forward, and we
Yes,
can
sir, I understood.
on that.
Thank you.
So,
But, I mean, he is waiting to get going and build, and we've postponed the TRC until, we resolve this year's
Right.
issue, because if this doesn't get resolved, then, like I said, we're not moving forward. And so there's no need in wasting everybody's time and effort. But Catherine, I mean, I'll rely on your expertise to, do you think there's something that can be worked out?
I apologize. I don't sit on the technical review committee, and I haven't been part of this review until the variance was requested. So, but I mean, just in a cursory look, it certainly looks like there are things that can be done, including the use of pervious paving material, a reduction in the number of parking spaces, and planting trees where, there isn't already proposed to be paving material. I think that there are things that can be done. Whether or not it's going to suit your client's needs of that, I'm unsure.
Okay. Well, fair enough. We'll continue. I'll have some additional conversations with the town, and we'll see if we need to come back or not.
okay, yeah, and like I said, I didn't mean to force that, but I just didn't
No,
want
sir,
to.
fair.
Yeah,
I appreciate the heads up and the fairness.
Well, you would be coming back with lesser variances. If you can do pervious surface, you don't need any shading, so that's gone. And you may be able to reconfigure the parking, who knows?
Well, to me, the only thing I see changing moving forward is the pervious surface. And all that's going to do is remove the need for the shade trees in the rear.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know he's got, batter boards up and the gravel in place, but, maybe you can shift things around a little bit and maybe reconfigure things a little bit.
Right.
I don't
Well,
know.
like I said, if you look on the site plan, unless we take that building and cut it in half, which then doesn't meet its needs, he's got to have the parking because he's got that many employees unless he cuts back staffing, which, I don't think he's willing to do, because if he didn't have the business, he wouldn't have the staffing. But right now, every square inch of that property is maxed out.
Yeah. And during those 30 days to the next hearing, if you were having that conversation, some things you can also look at are alternatives to the fact of there's alternatives of employees taking vehicles home. There's or getting neighboring parking for it. It's something that can be looked at, because, like I said, it may be that it doesn't work, and I hate to prolong the inevitable.
Sure.
But I think sometimes because you're going into a situation where there's a number of other lots exactly like that. And if we do one and don't follow the four, then we just, and it's our, like I said, we don't have really, our hands are tied. Our job's sort of easy because we have to
No,
follow
sir,
four.
I fully understand,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
have well briefed my client, on this going in. I mean, like I said, I feel sorry for the gentleman.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never met him personally, other talked to him. Our office is in Hampstead. I work remotely out of my home in Apex. And so a lot of my clients, I just talk to them over the phone and emails. And this poor gentleman, he has gotten in so many binds on this, and he'll call me and talk for an hour, just wanting input and somebody to lean on, just things that he just had no idea. And he's not alone. A lot of people go into stuff like this and don't have a clue, what all is involved and what needs to be taken care of before you just go in and put up a building and lay down some asphalt. So we'll take the 30 days, and I will have discussions, and I will see what his minimums are, and then circle back with Zach at the town and see what we may be able to work out, if anything, and we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, the next meeting, if I'm right, is April 17th. So that being, since a continuance has been asked, would someone make a motion to?
I'd like to
Continues?
make a motion that we continue item 1, 413 Shipyard Boulevard to the April 17 Board of Adjustment meeting.
Second.
Okay, that being second, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll see you on the 17th, maybe.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for your time today.
Yes, sir, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item number 2. It's for 3741 Oleander Drive. It's a variance to City Code Section 18-389 related to wall sign standards to exceed the maximum allowable 50 square feet of signage for tenants within a multi-unit commercial building. And Grace, you're doing this This one?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Grace LeMay, Associate Planner for the City of Wilmington. The subject property today of 3741 Oleander Drive is approximately 7.2 acres and is zoned RB Regional Business. The subject property is located within a commercial shopping center known as Hanover Center. The variance request pertains specifically to a corner unit within this shopping center. On or about February 6, 2025, city zoning staff issued approval for a change of use permitting a general retail use to operate from this location. The applicant has proposed one wall sign measuring 131.43 square feet to be mounted on the south-facing facade of the unit. The Land Development Code Section 18389 states that multi-unit buildings shall be permitted either 2 wall signs per unit, no more than 1 per facade, up to 50 square feet total, or 200 square feet per building, whichever is greater. Due to the number of units within the building, the option permitting up to 2 wall signs per unit, up to 50 square feet total, provides the greatest amount of signage. The applicant has requested a variance to Land Development Code Section 18389 to allow 1 wall sign at 131.43 square feet, a variance of 81.43 square feet. The applicant states that the visibility of a 50 square foot sign would be limited due to the building's location on the backside of the parcel, as well as the existence of multiple structures on the front of the parcel, further obscuring the view of this unit. In December of 2024, the applicants also received city and county permit approval to install a 47 square foot wall sign at this location, which received a final zoning inspection on or about March 17, 2025. In January of 2023, the Board of Adjustment considered a similar request for a retail tenant in the same shopping center to install a 169 square foot wall sign and determined that the request did not meet the criteria for the board to grant a variance. On February 4th, 2025, city staff accepted an application for a variance to the wall sign standards for a multi-unit building in the commercially zoned district. This matter is set for hearing before the board on March 20th, 2025. I'd like to submit this report and all the attachments to the record. I'm available for any questions, and I believe the applicant's representative is as well.
Is the sign that's on the building now out of compliance?
No, it's within compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for that. Just to make sure I heard correctly, so it is theoretically possible to have 2 50-foot square signs, given the configuration of this building, ma'am?
They could have up to 2 signs, but the total area of those 2 signs can only be up to 50 square feet.
I see. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you. We'll go for the applicant. We show Heather English. Is someone here to speak on behalf of the applicant?
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Heather English. I am the agent for the sign company and here on behalf for Dollar Tree.
Okay. Thank you. Can you just state your address for the record?
Sure. 8552 Racine Road, and that is in Pleasant Garden, North Carolina, 27313.
All right. Thank you.
So Dollar Tree loved this unit, moved forward, and this shopping center building is set back about 450 feet from the street, as well as there's a Hardee's, there's a bank, there is also a retail store that was formerly a Talbot's, I believe, that are clustered in front of this particular building. And coming each direction down Oleander, those buildings do obscure view of the front of that building. With a sign allowed at 50 square foot, now Dollar Tree wanted to go ahead and make sure that they had a sign on their building before they opened. They're very, very close. I did do a walkthrough of the shopping center yesterday when I got into town. I did take some photos. I realized there is a photo here that shows the sign, but it does not show the sign in relation to the setback from the road, how far it is. May I share these with?
Yeah, you can give them to Casey, and then she'll pass them out. And
This shows the sign installed, the full frontal of the shopping center so that you can see how small Dollar Tree's sign looks compared to the rest of the tenants, which I understand have been in the shopping center for some time. Just for a point of reference, Dollar Tree's letter height on this sign is 25 inches. Hobby Lobby's letters are 5 foot high. Office Depot and Books A Million's letters are 4 foot high. So given the number of letters in the Dollar Tree name to have their name on the front of their store, they were limited to a 25-inch high letter that you would have to be able to read from 450 feet away from the street. Now, Grace mentioned that would be allowed 2 signs with it being a corner unit. The side faces Floral Parkway, but then we would give up, trying to split 50 square foot between 2 frontages of the building. There really was absolutely no benefit to trying to do that, to have a sign on Floral. So they maximized what, the ordinance would allow. There are a few charts that have been distributed by the International Sign Association, giving the best. There's been lots and lots of research and studies on, what distances are required to see certain letter heights for signs, and they have asked for the minimal amount of letter height for a sign here based on the distance of the front of the building away from the street.
anybody have any questions? All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go into the evidentiary hearing. Open it up for anyone from the public that has had anything material or substantive to this matter. Seeing that we don't have anyone, we'll go ahead and close that. We'll move on to any rebuttal. Catherine? Or I guess Grace, I'm sorry. Grace, is your case.
Nothing further from the city. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Questions? I have one. The existing signs for Office Depot and Books A Million, those were approved because they were approved by the previous code.
That is correct. The new code went into effect December of 2021 and allowed for much more signage. In rewriting the sign code, City Council recognized that making the commercial corridors more aesthetically pleasing could be achieved through reducing sign clutter along those corridors. And so they did reduce the amount of signage that was allowed for different commercial uses.
Other questions?
Forgive me, and this may require the applicant back, I'm sorry. So right now we have about a 47.1 square foot, Dollar Tree sign.
Right.
And the contrast to me looks great, but the dark green versus the white. And you all want, if I heard correctly, a 130 square foot?
It's 131 square feet, given
Right.
the height of the letter that would, be ideal to be readable from that distance.
I see. So I guess my question, and at least in the back of my mind, is, and I have no idea how that 131 square feet would relate, if at all, aesthetically and otherwise, to the existing, previously approved signs
Right.
under the previous version of the code. But is there some number in between 47 and 131 that would maybe fit with what already exists, if you all have calculated that, without being too, I have no idea whether, because 131 does sound huge to me, but I may be
Well,
wrong.
if we
Thank you.
look at this in a proportionate manner, correct me if I'm wrong, Grace, but the standard regulation for a single tenant standalone building is you can't exceed 20% of the wall. This 50 square foot sign is 3.26% of the area of the front of the building. That 131 square foot sign, that sounds like a lot of signage, but that's only 8.5% of the total square footage of the front of the building. That building is 20 foot tall by 75.5 foot in width. And that sign band area is 10 feet in height.
But the way the ordinance is written, that's really irrelevant to compliance with the ordinance.
Okay.
We'd have to, like, the things that we have to comply by are the four findings of where it makes it, why is it different? Because we've had others in that we have denied because of the ordinance, and that are sit back from, Oleander, the same distance.
Okay.
So just, that's where, things that the findings that you see, something on those that would just break that away from, like, the way the other people are, like, something happens to those buildings, those signs, they wouldn't go back. They'd have to comply with the new
Right.
code, and that's sort of where our hands are tied on and with that. So
Right.
that's where, trying to figure that out, so,
Right.
okay.
But thank you for answering my question, ma'am.
Yeah, does anyone have any other questions?
No, I do have a comment, though. I know we've looked at some of these ordinances and proposals in the past for adjustments to the code, and we've kind of, we've been consistent in the past. And I just kind of on a personal note, I was driving down Oleander Friday, I think, and just was driving down, and sure enough, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the Dollar Tree sign. Like, so it's kind of hard for me to rule in favor of any hardship in this, just because I went home and told my wife, like, hey, there's a Dollar Tree, like, right down the road. So, so just personally,
Sure.
it would be difficult.
And
for
I
me.
understand, and this was something Dollar Tree felt like they wanted to invest in a hope that maybe you guys would find in favor. That, obviously with the economy the way it is, there's lots of major brand stores that are closing now. They're just trying to ensure that, they've invested this money in this store, they want it to succeed.
And, bear in mind too, as the tenants change in Hanover Center, they have to comply. And if something happens to
Right.
the signs, they would have to comply. So
Right.
eventually, the way the ordinance is written, all the signage would be virtually the same size.
Right, and if you look at that photo to think about, there's 3 other tenants in this building, 200 square foot max, they're gonna each be allowed a 50 square foot sign. And if you think about a 50 square foot sign on Hobby Lobby, that's gonna be quite small, but it is, the ordinance is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a 50 square foot sign on HomeSense, so.
Right.
All right. Any more questions of Ms. English? All right. I appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming back up.
Thank
I guess if you have questions of city or anything, if not, ask what your thoughts are and the direction you'd like to take this one. Anyone?
Well, I think given the 4 findings of fact and our charge and the way the sign ordinance is written, I just don't see how the variance request can proceed forward.
Do you want a motion?
I would like to make a motion that we deny the variance request of 3741 Oleander Drive.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, that being the case, all those in favor of the denial of the variance, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that variance does not pass. We'll move on to item number 3. It's Third and Kidder Street. The variance is to the City Code Section 18-44 to waive fenestration requirements for the residential structure in the UMX district. And Catherine, you're doing this one.
Thank you. The subject property contains approximately 1/3 of an acre. It's located at the northeast corner of 3rd and Kidder Streets and currently contains a commercial structure that most recently operated as a contractor's office. The property is zoned urban mixed use with other UMX zoning to the north, south, and west, and residential zoning to the east. The UMX district supports a fine grain mix of residential and commercial uses within close proximity to one another, and per the purpose statement outlined in City Code, this district is established to assure an appropriate development pattern is maintained within the 1945 corporate limits by establishing district regulations, including design elements that are intended to enhance the urban form, increase neighborhood safety, add flexibility for small urban lots, and complement the historic built environment. The applicant has proposed to develop the property with a residential townhouse project consisting of 8 two-story units. The applicant attended a pre-TRC meeting in March of 2023 and was informed of various code requirements that would be necessary for development of the site, including fenestration and alley access, rather than accessing from 3rd or Kidder Street. In May of 2023, the applicant obtained a variance to allow direct access from Kidder Street, and the site plan included in your case summary has been updated accordingly. Also, as part of the formal TRC review, the applicant submitted elevations for the proposed project. In reviewing those, staff determined that the fenestration requirements had been misapplied. Fenestration by code is defined as the arrangement, proportioning, and design of openings, mainly windows and doors, on a building facade, and city code allows glass used to satisfy that requirement to have a maximum of 15% reflectivity. And the term fenestration is also sometimes interchanged with glazing. These are a few examples of residential projects, some local, some not, and they appear to be predominantly glazed on the ground floor elevation, though I don't have the exact calculations. Land Development Code Section 1844 sets forth design requirements for buildings in the UMX district to ensure compatibility with the existing development pattern in an urban form in general by requiring that building facades incorporate periodic transitions such as facade offsets, pilasters, changes in materials, or fenestration, and also requires a minimum of 50% fenestration along those street-level facades. Though fenestration can serve as a building transition, a change in materials does not constitute fenestration unless that material is transparent. The illustration on the left demonstrates the meaning of facade transitions, while the illustration on the right shows fenestration requirements and clearly depicts windows and glass openings as those elements used to satisfy the requirements. This illustration, prepared by the applicant, shows what they've included for the purposes of calculating fenestration, which amounts to 59% of the ground floor facade. However, the applicant has included solid material as glazing. What's shown in blue outlines the portion of the facade that would be considered fenestration per city code. And that appears, just kind of taking all the boxes and shoving them into a corner, to be about maybe 20% of the ground floor facade. And that's along the 3rd Street elevation. We'll just quickly give the same rundown on the Kidder Street facade, along which fenestration requirements are allowed to be reduced from 50% to 30% as long as the applicant includes additional architectural treatment along that facade. So this illustration shows the applicant's calculation, again, including some solid materials. This illustration shows staff's assessment of what should count. And this illustration would suggest that the actual fenestration provided is about maybe 15% of the facade. On or about February 7th, 2025, city staff accepted an application for a variance to City Code Section 1844 for fenestration requirements in the urban mixed-use district. The specific numeric amount of the request has not yet been provided, as we have not established the exact amount of ground floor fenestration that is proposed. And in reviewing the graphics in greater detail, staff realized that some of the areas depicted as vision openings on one of the diagrams also seems to be covered by a perforated metal guard, which would render even that opaque. This matter is set before the Board of Adjustment today, March 20th. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have of city staff, and the applicant is also present.
All right, does anyone have questions of Catherine at this time? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So you just mentioned something which is very interesting. I hadn't thought of that, or didn't quite click before. Perforated guards. So if you had, under the code, if you had, a window, something was fenestrated, but you then had some sort of perforated, I don't know, balustrade or something like that, does that then eliminate that much of that window from consideration as a percentage of the building that is to be fenestrated? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, if it's applied to the facade such that the facade itself is no longer transparent, then yeah, it wouldn't count as glazing.
Even though I assume that if it's perforated, there would be still some light coming back and forth, right? I mean, the whole point would be some sort of matrix or trellis kind of thing, and so there would still be light passing. It wouldn't be a solid
Right, the requirement is that it be transparent.
All right, thank you for clarifying.
All right, anybody else? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see if the applicant would like to speak.
I'm Kevin Furman, the developer, architect.
And just for the record, we just need your address.
307 Martin Street, Wilmington,
Okay, thank you.
401. So it's tough to see with this, the light behind this rendering. It's pretty washed out. But our intent, as far as the screen goes, what you could call it a scrim. It's perforated metal. There's a company.
Sir, could you please put the microphones up a little bit more? Thank you.
How's that? Is that working?
Yeah, better.
Okay. So the scrim, or the screen, you could
Yes,
call it a number of
scrim.
things.
Okay, thank you.
Brise-soleil, it's intended to keep people, so those are sliding doors on the upper level and the lower level. And they're designed to operate as guardrails so people don't fall out of the building. So you're supposed to be able to open your living room there and just allow the breeze to come in and out. But we didn't just want to put a regular guardrail on there. We wanted to do something perforated for really two reasons: to provide some privacy, but also if the light will come through there. The perforations are so fine that it would probably be more than 75% open. I could give you a specification on those sheets that we were intending to use. It's a company called McNichols, and they have a catalog that has all these different perforated sheets. And we've used them before for all sorts of different things, for fireplace screens, and we've used them for a lot of different crafts that we've made in the past. But in the rendering, in this rendering, it appears as a solid white blob that's obscuring. But you are correct in assuming that at night, if the lights were on and you drove past the place, the glass would be as clear as, I guess, 100% clear, and then there would just be a slight value. You'd be able to see people moving behind it, and I mean, I think it actually would probably be more exciting than just a plain wall. So I see where I think that's probably an error in assuming that that's opaque.
Oh, well, I was actually sort of thinking the other way, sir, though, that is, say, letting some light in, and the fact that it's perforated would allow some sunlight and so forth to come into your residences.
Yes, and you can,
the other way
you
of
can see
looking at
through.
it.
It's just kind of like a veil, you know, like my mom used to put sheer curtains up in the front of our house, so you could barely see through. It's kind of that sort of effect is what we're after. We want to be able to see through it, but at the same time, if you're sitting still, somebody wouldn't be able to see you behind that. So we're really, I guess the reason why we're here is we've studied this UMX, and we did the townhome projects a block away at LaRue, and the difference between this development and say LaRue is those townhomes are 16 feet wide, and they're just slotted in one next to each other like an old-fashioned kind of row house type development. And when you have a building that's, say, 35 feet, 36 feet deep, and 16 feet wide, you've got to put as much windows on each end as you possibly can in order to get light into the depth of the building. And if you want to hide from the street, or if you want to hide from the backyard or the courtyard, you just put your living room in the center of the space where it's dark and nobody can see you. But, so LaRue barely made the 30% or the 50% glazing on the street side. But it was okay, and it didn't bother us as designers and architects, and because the whole site was raised up on a plinth. There was a retaining wall there, and we had steps that went up, and there were planters, and so the finished floor level of the buildings were off the street. And then you add the window sills to 15 or 18 inches above that, nobody could see into the buildings, and they're very private, and which is what I think a residence should be. So that's where we're grappling with this, with the code, is the code seems to be designed to in a UMX to support retail establishments on the ground level, and there's really no provision in the code for buildings that are entirely residential, and that's really the reason why we're here, is it just doesn't work in a residential situation unless it's a long, skinny building. So leave it to the architects to push the limits. I don't know of any courtyard buildings around. I've been to different places in Rome and seen these beautiful courtyard buildings, and it seems super appropriate in this environment. It's noisy, and there's soot, and it's smelly, and you just want a place to hide. And we created this internal courtyard, and as a result, all the buildings are oriented long ways. So if you were to look at the glazing that we've applied on the interior of the courtyard, as well as the street side, it's beyond 50% glazing, but we chose to put it on the inside. And my associate and I were before we even went to the technical review, we took it upon ourselves, because we do this a lot in our buildings. We'll group windows into a giant sort of rectangular composition like that, because what we're after is exactly what you see here. It appears as voids, and we're really just after a massing or a pattern that creates a certain type of scale. And that was our choice to do this before we even met with them, was to place the windows in there inside the brick. So first of all, it's an entirely brick building except for the cutouts, where that's going to be black stained cypress and windows placed in there with horizontal drip bands at the sills and the head of each one of those windows, and just filled in with cypress. And it's all supposed to be stained one color, so they really appear as giant voids, almost like big old garage doors that open up. But do we have some of the slides that we brought? We had a video that we brought that we put in here. That would be helpful. Did you all see that there was a video link on?
Let's see, I thought it was in the package we got. Let's see.
There was more to it.
It's in the letter.
It's a hyperlink? There was a hyperlink in there? Did you all see that?
Yeah.
I remember seeing the drawings that indicated the courtyard feature, which I think is
So when I
interesting.
guess when we went online to see.
Yeah, it's in your letter, I think.
What's that?
I thought it was in your letter, but.
When I reviewed what was posted online as far as the agenda, it had all of our information that we had given the technical review committee. And there was did you all get to see that video?
I did.
At all? Okay. Can we scroll through any of the other images that we have in here of the project? Of the ones that my associate and I submitted?
Mr. Furman, those images were included in the material that was given to the Board of Adjustment, but there wasn't a separate presentation prepared for you.
I'm confused. When we've come here in the past, the graphics that we submit for our application in support of our case are usually available on the screen. They're not?
We've provided them to the board, so they have those materials themselves. However, we did not choose to include the materials in staff's presentation. Typically, an applicant will prepare a presentation to make to the board.
Hey, Catherine, I've got the color renderings. Is it okay if I pass those back and forth so everyone can see them?
If you go to the letter that's on the city website and you click on your link, I'm watching it right now.
Okay.
It comes. I watched it on the. Yeah, they're going to pull it up. I think it's worth them.
Okay, so you're able to
We
see
have pulled it up,
the
yeah.
animation.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
I was going to.
I saw that when you were saying. I was just trying to find where it was in the package.
Okay, good,
But
good,
yeah,
good,
I'd
good.
seen
'Cause
it before.
we really put a lot of time in that, hopefully to convince you all what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And part of the idea of this courtyard scheme was we knew there was going to be a lot of rainwater, and the rainwater, what we've learned from LaRue, there's a huge problem with the runoff and trying to manage that. The underground drains back up, and water's backing up into their porches, and we've drilled holes in the sides of the planters and come back and tried to remedy all that. So what we did with this site plan is we created these, each unit has, oh, there you go. Each unit, perfect. There you go. So each unit has a scupper where the water pours off to the inside of the courtyard, and it falls into a rain garden. When that rain garden fills up, that spills into another less wet area that has a cypress trees in it. And above this whole, the idea is this is supposed to be like a little representation of Greenfield Lake. I want this thing to be kind of swampy, full of all sorts of critters, and this boardwalk just floats over top of it. And there's 4 cypress yards in there, and then there's 4 ponds in there. So each one of these residences has a deck and sliding doors and windows that open into this oasis. And that's why this is so much better than that LaRue project that we did, because it creates this atmosphere on the inside. That's really cool. Kevin is great. This is Kevin Stevens back here. He's an architect, and he works in my office, and he's a whiz at making these come to life. So it really is a typology that has not really been explored here, and we could probably meet the fenestration requirements if we took all the windows off the courtyard side and put them on the outside of the building and pushed all the beds up against the walls on the courtyard side and focused our attention on the street from the interior. But that's not what we're trying to do. But you can see with the renderings, our intention there was to really create giant groupings of windows and get the massing to look like the windows were bigger or there's larger masses, but to have 50%, I guess we're confused as to why you would want 50% windows on the ground level. If we were trying to convey that this was a storefront, which when you see all their images in the LDC, I mean, it seems obvious that some of these images here that Ms. Thurston had posted up there, these are for commercial establishments, and people are supposed to have their wares on display, and the lights are on, and we go in there and we buy T-shirts or whatever it is, but we're not selling T-shirts from these townhomes. We're just trying to have a private dinner in there.
Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, it can date back to the fact of when, like, the Family Dollar decided to put windows and they put boards behind them back in the day when they changed. That was in the old code. I think because a lot of it was in the UMX, the commercial side is to have that clear sense. But like I said, I don't think we have addressed when we have residential in the UMX. It's
right, by
it's
right, we're
different
allowed
dynamic.
to have residential
Exactly.
on that, and it seems as though the code is written as though all buildings in UMX are mixed use, but we've decided by right to just create a residential development, and furthermore, we didn't go with the highest density. We could get 9 units on this, but we actually went with 8 to create this geometry and that works well for this design, and I think it was really the only way to do it.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time today. So are these units intended to be leased or sold
They'll be
individually?
sold.
Okay. 'Cause that really makes a difference to me, because if they were to be leased, then eventually, potentially, they could turn into a commercial building. So I think personally it makes sense.
They'll be
that
sold. They'll be, just like our former project, we have a neighborhood association, a restrictive covenant that I've written with our attorneys to make sure that nobody will ever come in here and turn the ground floor into an architect's office or something like that.
UMX does not require off-street parking, is that right?
Correct,
And
that's
you
right.
do have a off-street parking lot on Kidder.
We do, and I've found that it's absolutely
Yeah,
necessary, because
okay.
the demographic for these places is typically a young husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. They buy this, she parks behind the gate, he parks on the street right in front of their door. That's typically how it works. But the way this is configured, we actually got a couple extra parking spaces in there, and still we're able to go above and beyond any stormwater requirements with the design that we integrated as part of the architecture and the site plan, and still get the parking.
I also want to mention that the board cannot take into consideration whether it's leased
use.
or sold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they'll never be, these will never be commercial establishments of any kind.
But you can restrict that in a variance, that there cannot be a commercial use and or it has to convert. If you gave a variance, you can't
You
restrict that.
can't, no, the board can't restrict
Yeah.
how the property is used.
Right, but if you grant a variance to a specific use, if they changed it, you couldn't.
No, it's
Okay.
not use specific.
You should be. I think it's a new thing that should be written. any more questions before we go into the evidentiary hearing? We'll probably have more questions, sure. I don't know if we'll have anyone talk or not, but I'm sure we'll have more questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. We're going to go into the evidentiary hearing and ask for anyone in the public that would like to speak for any relevant or substance to this matter.
Andrea Arth with Arth Real Estate Group, 124 Walnut Street, Unit 405. I've worked with Kevin Furman on the previous one, LaRue on 3rd Street. And as he said, it's for residential, you can't really see into the homes, and it's actually a rather private area. On the design that they have, it's very much street front. For the front of it, ultimately, providing privacy, so you do have, like you said, courtyard. For the code, if you're looking at what everybody else has followed on it, Rogue has followed with the 50% on front, Time has, but they've also lent to having offices up front also. So you have that added office up front that they have allowed ultimately to fit the code at that aspect of it. We're in a time where they're adding another 300, 400 square feet to accommodate those windows, so they actually fit the code at that aspect of it. When we're doing it, we're actually pushing the prices up higher because you're accommodating the windows with a dead space that nobody's actually using unless they have a home office. These are around 1,100 square feet for resale for residential. So there will be no home office on it. So on that aspect of it, it keeps the cost of it down in a time where we're looking at affordable housing, as we say, affordable in Wilmington in general, to keep it at a cost effective for the units itself, keeping it at 1,100 square feet, but also allowing the fact that it is a residential. It gives the privacy without having the 50% and just allowing the 30% on that aspect of it.
All right, thank you. Okay. Anyone else that would like to speak in the, and you'll have time after we close the hearing too, but you're welcome to speak during this if you like. Yeah, you can. We stay here and we'll hear it both ways. So, yeah.
I just want to respond to Andrea's comment. She helped us out in selling and really creating the neighborhood association and everything to make the last project ironclad. But I wanted to make sure that you all understand that this is an expensive project. It's not, these things are gonna go for top dollar. That's gonna be $1,000, 1,000 brick on this project. That's cypress. These are high-grade Interlux windows. We have spray foam insulation. These are not cheap buildings. They're gonna be really well made. So I don't want anybody to get the idea that there's less windows because we can't afford them. There's twice as many windows in this building as any 1,000 square foot project. Just want to make sure you knew that.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else in the public that would like to speak during it? If not, I'll close the evidentiary hearing. We'll go in. Does the city have some additional information?
The evidentiary hearing is closed at this point, so.
Do you want me to I can reopen it? How about this? I'll reopen the evidentiary hearing. Okay, we're good.
I'll just state that I think that this design is beautiful and would certainly be an asset to the city, 3rd Street, Kidder, the whole area. This is a request for a variance, though, from city code, and there are the 4 findings that have to be met. We have looked at, the urban mixed-use district is a relatively new district in the land development code, and we've made tweaks to it over the years to accommodate things that staff hasn't considered that would be an important and attractive element in the area. An example is what they've done with the cargo district and South Front area, where we had to change the code to allow incorporation of metal shipping containers for construction use. And so if that is the thought, then there is a process for changing the code to accommodate different design elements that haven't previously been anticipated. The urban mixed-use district, it is one of our more form-based districts, so we don't look at the use of the buildings so much, but more whether or not the design of the buildings fits in with the surrounding area. And that code section has been drafted in a way that tries to create that design that would fit in with what's predominantly a commercial setting. But we understand that a mix of uses is important to the vibrancy of that area. So that's just a little bit of background on the urban mixed use. And then Amy, if you could scroll back to some of the examples that were discussed, just so that you guys can visualize things that the applicant brought up with. I don't have a picture of LaRue Townhomes, which is developed in the urban mixed use district, but we do have some from the Central Business District. That's a townhome development in Virginia. These are, sorry, where you were, that's good. Kevin, you're right, the lighting's difficult. But you can see the photo to the left, 702, that's I assume a residential development that the applicant designed. And there's glazing on the garage and to the left-hand side, but again, the lighting it's hard to see that. Then on the right-hand side, Rob Romero designed that residential development consistent with our glazing requirements as well, just to demonstrate that it can be done.
Yeah, those all have offices down. I sold all those. Those all have offices in the downstairs on it with a separate entrance. Okay. All right, I didn't mean to, but yeah, thank you.
No, you're correct. Whenever they went through plan review, the idea was that the bottom floor would be flex space, so that whoever bought it or rented it would be able to use it for either.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the background, Catherine.
Certainly.
Yeah. So we're still in the evidentiary hearing. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak during this part? And then we'll let the applicant come back up and talk.
I have a question for Catherine.
Yeah, sure.
So you're talking about there's an option during that discussion of time to make an adjustment. How is that discussed if we can't discuss if the building's going to be sold or not?
Oh, well, we aren't allowed to, whenever we're considering a variance, this may be we can't take into consideration the applicant, the person requesting the variance, their specific condition or anything about them. It's strictly based on the property itself and unique circumstances about that property that would warrant the issuance of a variance. We also aren't allowed to consider whether units are going to be bought or sold, because that would be taking into consideration the end user on the project, which isn't germane to whether or not there's some special and unique situation about a piece of property that prevents it from being able to comply with the strict standard of the code.
Okay. Well, in your explanation of having an option to be a home office or not, that would seem somewhat similar to ownership or not, but I don't know, just questioning. I had no idea, but thank you.
Certainly.
All right, if there are any more questions during the evidence, I'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing, and we'll go back to ask if there's anything else for the city to add. Oh,
nothing further from the city.
All right, does the, can you come up, Mr. Furman? Just. And I guess, as you know, like we're bound by the 4 findings of fact. Can we put those up on the screen? And because, like I said, the situation, like there's no question your project looks great, and like then the city likes it. So, and going at it, trying to figure out that we have a code that we can't change. But the variance has to. These 4 findings, we have to see why your situation gets this variance.
Okay. Could we scroll back to some of those images that we just had?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
702 Waynick. Let's start with those. Let's go back one. Okay, so that's exactly what we did at LaRue. There's no problem with having 50% windows. You come up 5 steps. You're covered with bushes. That's great. I'll sit on that porch all day long and with my kids and not be disturbed, but that works. Raise the building up 5 steps, get people off the street. They're even farther off the street. We're right on the street. So that's a poor example. And that's the same thing right there. There's an element of privacy and domain that's created when you put steps on a building like that. People don't want to come, they have to come up into your space, and they won't do that. You could even put a gate between those columns, so.
Mr. Chair,
That's,
if you're going to consider further evidence, you need to reopen the evidentiary hearing.
Okay, he can't do, okay, all right, so,
let's go to the one
all
before
right,
that
with
with the.
procedurally, I thought he could be able to just add for his part of it, because he's
He
the
can
applicant.
answer questions, but if you're getting into a detailed
Okay.
discussion with new evidence, it needs to
That
be
works,
open.
just so we follow procedure, so in case you do need to appeal, it's right. But we're going to reopen the evidentiary hearing, so.
Okay. Are we,
It's
open
like,
again?
yeah, we're going to see how many times we can do this, but, yeah, so we're open again.
I designed that building right there. That's Steve Herbert's house. He's actually the financer for LaRue in this project. It's a concrete, cast-in-place concrete house at Ricel Beach. And that garage door is barely even translucent. You can't see it. That garage door would never pass for UMX because you can't see through it, and that's the requirement of the glass. The left-hand part of that building, too, has an aluminum pivot gate that's 100% opaque. You can't see the actual entrance to that building. You have to walk up to it, behind the walled garden, push on that pivot gate to discover the entrance. So I don't know why that's there. And I believe these projects here by Rob Romero, who's a good friend of mine, architect here in town, there are provisions in those buildings. Those front spaces are designed to be offices so that they can satisfy. So which is why I'm confused when Ms. Thurston talks about how their code is form-based and not use-based. That form is based on the use of the building. And all these projects, these variances, and these buildings we have to bring up to code when we change use usually affects the form of the building. So they're one and the same. I think form and use are, you have to consider both, and we don't have a flex space in our buildings that would provide any reason to put this kind of glazing on there. And she also talks, Catherine also talks about this predominantly commercial use along 3rd Street. It's not the case. It's mostly houses up and down that street, places to live. There's the Habitat for Humanity, I think. There's Trish's Made in Brazil, but then we have South Front, and it's mostly residences and a weird metal building church there, and this weird metal building here that's already on the site. So I think it's kind of it's a new place, and I think that the issue that we have here, gentlemen, is that we're looking for a place in the UMX code that addresses a building that is all residential and not mixed use. And let's face it, people order off of Amazon now. People don't go shopping on the street, on 3rd Street down here, because there's just not a lot of people living there yet. It can't support a pizza place. The poor coffee shop there has changed hands 3 times. It's really hard to keep business up and running on that street because there's just simply not enough people living there. So I think a commercial storefront or some kind of shop and retail on 3rd Street in this part of town, I personally think is a long way off. I think you need to have more people living there before that works.
Yeah, I guess part of like with Catherine and us, like we don't approve the code. We didn't write it. They did write, but ultimately city council approved what it is, and that's who changes it. Our only role here is how these 4 findings of fact. How does your property and what you're doing create the nuance that you meet these 4 findings of fact that the variance could be approved? That's what our main concern is. Mm-hmm. Like the project or the use. It's solely how those 4 findings of fact. That's why we want to give you the opportunity to just like where you fall out of the circumstance that creates the requirement of this variance.
Well, I think the hardship is the code is not written to consider residences on the ground level of a building on a busy street. The form that they're trying to dictate is an antiquated form that it doesn't exist on the street there in a residence. There's nobody living above a shop. Maybe there needs to be a text amendment in the future. Maybe a variance can be granted on the grounds that this doesn't work for a ground floor residence with no offices. But there ought to be some kind of amendment made to the code to exclude, or just maybe it's not 50%, maybe it's 30% or whatever it is, because we certainly don't want to just have 4 windows on the front of a building like this.
And the 4 findings of fact are addressed in Mr. Furman's letter. It says strict application of the ordinance result in the residential dwelling units be subject to an unusually large amount of glazing at the street level. Second paragraph, hardship is a result of the location, a UMX zoning district where residences are permitted, yet the residence is required to have false appearance of a commercial establishment. The hardship did not result from actions of the owner. The hardship is a direct result of an ordinance written to give residents a false appearance of a commercial district. So the four findings of fact are addressed in Mr. Furman's letter to the board.
I just wanted it to be on this record, so, yeah, thank you. All right, that's.
We good?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Furman? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody have any questions for the city? So, I mean, we'll go ahead and close the evidentiary hearing.
Yes.
And now we'll go into, there's any other items anyone would like to discuss?
Well, I mean, you know, in looking at the proposed project, there were some concessions made, and it's allowed for 9 units, which could be slotted and probably meet the fenestration requirements. There's no off-street parking required, yet off-street parking is provided. And in my opinion, the courtyard does offset some of the fenestration, even though it's not on the street. And I do think the four findings of fact, in my mind, have been addressed.
I would like to second my colleague's comments on that point about the fenestration as well. Thank you.
All right, you want to go ahead and make a motion?
Well, I thought I'd see if there was any further discussion on the board.
We can always have further, you can make a motion and we can discuss, either way. Anybody? All right,
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the variances requested based on the four findings of fact addressed in Mr. Furman's letter to the board.
then there's been a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all of that being the case, all those in favor of the variance say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That variance passes. We'll move on to item number 4. I believe it's regarding 154 Parkwood Drive. This item has been asked for a continuance, is that correct?
Yes, sir. The applicant has requested a continuance to the April 17th meeting.
Okay, and that being the case, is there anyone that would
I'll go ahead and
the
make
motion?
another motion, and I'd like to make a motion that item 4, 154 Parkwood Drive be continued to the April 17 Board of Adjustment meeting.
All right, is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That will be continued. Is there anything new or additional from the city?
I believe that we have a new alternate. However, I did not bring the information on who that, I can't remember the name off of the top of my head. Perhaps we'll bring more information about that to the April meeting.
I have a letter in my desk from the city. That might be from Penny. That's what maybe that's what
A
it is.
new alternate
I
to
should
be
probably
named
open it.
later.
But yeah, I will next. I'll get to that. But anything else?
Nothing further from the city.
All right. All right. That being the case, we'll adjourn.